Hello, everyone. This is David, and tonight's movie that we watched is the 1989 movie Deepstar Six. Now, this is kind of like a quasi sequel, in terms of my reviews, not in terms of the actual movie, to Leviathan. In that this and Leviathan came out the same year, and they were trying to follow on the coattails of the Abyss. Now, I've already talked about the Abyss in my Leviathan review, so I'm not going to rehash all that information here. But this sort of took it in a different way. So this movie is not as funny as Leviathan, um, and in a lot of ways it falls kind of short. The monster is not nearly as inventive. Um, it is a crustacean of some sort. Kind of reminds me of a giant mantis shrimp, and the movie poses the question: in mantis shrimp, do you trust? Um, but in the end, it's an okay film. I mean, it's got good um, practical effects in it. The monster looks pretty good. You don't get to see a lot of it, unfortunately. Um, Again, kind of a drawback. And when you actually do get to see it, there's some part like the way the creature's mouth kind of works is kind of goofy. It's like this big flappy thing that opens up. Kind of reminds me of like a less interesting version of like the way a graboid mouth would work, because a graboid mouth was simple and effective, but this is just kind of over the top and really kind of silly when it's actually open. The monster actually looks far more fierce when its mouth is closed, in my opinion. Um, that being said, as I said, the monster in this doesn't really have any super special powers. He's attracted to light. Well, it's attracted to light. We never really find out its gender or anything like that. Um, it's very tough. It has an exoskeleton, like all crustaceans. It has some weird appendages that kind of work like hands, I guess. Uh, I would almost call them like, I would almost think they were supposed to be like lobster claws, but they aren't designed like lobster claws. They're more designed like a claw. So I don't know. Maybe it's just what it uses to walk along the bottom. Um, but yeah, so that about sums up the monster. It's not the most interesting thing, but it is well done. At least I can give it that. The movie itself is kind of lackluster, but the monster effects in this are decent. So, I mean, it gets some points for that. Now, the whole premise behind this movie, let's get into it, I guess, is that there's an undersea base, big surprise, and this group is, and this is, it takes place in the future, but it's taking place in the future where the Cold War is still going on. So the Deep Star project is basically we're planting a nuclear missile silos on the bottom of the ocean. Very Cold War. And what's kind of funny is I think the Soviet Union only collapsed like 1 or 2 years after this film came out. So it's kind of it kind of almost immediately got dated. Whereas Leviathan, they were just miners on the bottom of the sea, and the Abyss, they were just doing research. Um, this it's very dated in that fact that the Cold War ended almost immediately after this movie came out, and it takes place in the future. So it's got to take place in a different quantum reality. And there you go. I mean, I guess we could have been. I don't think they ever state who they're planning missiles against. I believe the understanding was the Russians, as that was, the dominant superpower at the time. But, in the future it could be the Chinese, or there could be a new Cold War between like us and the Chinese, or some other, or new Russia, as current um, current diplomacy with Russia is becoming quite difficult. But um, there's that. So anyway, so there's this U.S. Navy group, but they're not actually in the Navy. Um, they're actually civilians, which is kind of weird. And they've been working on this tour for 6 months, trying to basically get these nuclear missiles in place. And the site they've chosen is very unfortunate because, as it turns out, it is directly over a tunnel system, which they find out there's like a cavern underneath it. So they put like the guy who's in charge just doesn't care. So he's like, just blow it and collapse the cave. And they collapse the cave, and it causes a massive like cave in. And the two guys that were there, um, the oceanographer or marine biologist, I guess, wants them to send in, or one of the characters wants them to send in a probe basically to check out the cave before they seal it off. And they send in the probe. The probe gets attacked. They figure, fuck it, we gotta go retrieve the probe because we'll be in trouble if they find out we lost it. So they go in. They get attacked by something. You don't get to see what it is. And then whatever it is comes out and attacks the little station that's right next to the relay. They send out a rescue party basically to go save them. I mean, there's some little character stuff beforehand, but it was very kind of eh. The characters are very. They're not great characters. They're not terrible. Like they're not caricatures, but they are not the best. Like there's one guy who's kind of just motivated by macking on this one chick that they've been stuck down there with, and they kind of have this weird, awkward relationship. And this main character guy, I can't actually remember their names. Let me see if I can find them. Yeah, so there's McBride, who's the main character guy. He's not actually in charge, which is interesting, and he has like a relationship with Collins, I believe. That's how that works. And then, and so it turns out that Collins is pregnant with their kid, but she didn't bother to tell him. And also, they're in the future, so why aren't you using some form of birth control to having unexpected children at the bottom of the ocean? Just saying, like, there's a lot of issues with like being pregnant, and being pregnant at the bottom of the ocean, I'm sure can't be good for you. Like, but anyway, so that happens, and she doesn't tell McBride about it for no real discerned reason, like just because he's kind of like this roguey type character who's kind of like a drifter. Anyway, so him and the station commander, was it Lidlaw, are going to go basically bail them out. They get to they get sonar contact that's coming at them very quickly. They turn off everything, go to the bottom of the ocean, it drifts off. Excuse me. And they go to the base that got savaged. One of the guys that was working in there with Collins dies from injuries. They rescue Collins, but they lose the commander because he gets crushed by the door snapping. Poor design on those doors, by the way. The door snaps, crushes him. He tells them to go, floods the place. They return back to the thing. Snyder, who is this pretty interesting character, he's becoming increasingly stressed. They always give him shit jobs to do, and they always give him a hard time about everything and tell him to do it now or get it done. And he doesn't want to admit that he doesn't need help, or that he needs help. So they tell him to go secure the missiles, and he asks, the computer wants to be specific. Was it a natural force? Was it an act of aggression, or something else that I don't remember? And they said it was an act of aggression. Now, the computer reads that as the act of aggression was supposed to be another nation attacking them, a natural force being like wild animals, effectively, or an earthquake or something, which is what I would have written it as. But he writes it as act of aggression because that's what he says. That's what they say. So the thing is to detonate the warheads. The problem is they're not that far from the site, and they're far enough away where it's not going to blow them up, but they're not far enough away where it's not going to cause a lot of problems. So he detonates the missiles, and all hell breaks loose because they get hit with a big old shockwave, and it fucks up their base royal. How it doesn't kill the monster, though, is an interesting question. I don't know how it didn't kill the monster. They never really go into that. So suffice to say, they have to go do some station repairs to prevent the station from hemorrhaging air. Guy goes out. Monster, he comes running back in after he finishes the repair. Monster comes in through the airlock, bites him in half. Now the monster's in the ship. Kills the marine biologist. They got to figure out what to do. So they run away. They go get a bunch of weapons. They get a bunch of shotguns. They get a bunch of like harpoons that have CO2 canisters in them. They go back in there to fight it. Snyder freaks out, kills one of the doctors, Dr. Van Geller, by accidentally stabbing him in the back with the CO2 harpoon. So he dies. Snyder runs away. Snyder's like falling apart mentally. The monster's like fucking throwing a fit in the base. They all run away. Snyder decides, fuck it, I'm leaving. Jumps in the escape pod basically, and gets out of there. Unfortunately, he hadn't successfully decompressed, even though decompression doesn't work quite that way. But whatever. He hadn't successfully decompressed, so he dies from explosive decompression. Um, yeah, problems with that I'll get into in a little bit. Um, yeah, so that happens, and then there's just three of them left at that point. McBride goes out to get the submarine. He swims for it. Here's the issue I have, right? So, if they're deep enough where they need to they seriously need to decompress, or they'll basically like their arteries will fucking explode. He couldn't just go unassisted swimming outside. That doesn't make any sense. I think he's swimming through the station actually, but still, because the station partly flooded. But it looks like he swims outside to get to the mini sub. I don't really know. It's kind of unclear. But one way or another, this is weird. Because when you go to like the bottom of the ocean, if you're skin diving or scuba diving or whatever, you need a pressure suit because you're like a human body can't take the pressure changes. The reason you need to worry about decompression is basically nitrogen, which is an element that's in the air pretty commonly, will saturate into your blood, and if you under pressure, and if you decompress, that will boil and form basically pockets of air, which will cause aneurysms or whatever. It's called nitrogen narcosis. It's bad news. You can very easily die from it. However, it's not like you will explode. You'll get a bubble in your blood, and you will either like have a stroke or you will have a heart attack and die because your body can't process having gases like that, like just loose gas in its blood. It doesn't work right. Design flaw, but it's not meant. It shouldn't happen under any normal circumstances. So, but when you're in a facility that's like at the bottom of the ocean, you're not under those stresses because a human body can only take so much before it kind of gives out. I forget the exact number, but I think 400 feet is really the practical limit in terms of skin diving, and below that you kind of need some sort of suit. It might be deeper, but 400 feet's pretty deep, all things considered. So they shouldn't be super pressurized. Like the building itself will be pressurized to a certain degree. Like, yes, they will be under probably more than one atmosphere of pressure, but they won't be under 100 like ridiculous amounts of atmosphere of pressure. So that's a thing that I noted. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't work that way. And explosive decompression, despite its name, very rarely results in things actually exploding. So anyway, so he goes to get the sub. They hear a knocking on the door. They think it's McBride, so they open up the door, and water comes flooding in, and the monster comes in, and it kills the doctor, but the doctor kills it back with a defibrillator. McBride came to the other side of the airlock, which was open, but it needed 30 seconds to open. So Collins gets out. They get into the ship. They float away. The station explodes, theoretically killing the monster. At least it should have killed the monster. Which leads me to a conclusion I'll come to when I'm done. Alright, so that happens. That's all well and good. They escape. They get to the top. And shocker, the monster comes up for one more attack. He covers it in fuel and lights it on fire, and the monster dies, supposedly. And he dives to safety before the shuttle blows up, or the thing blows up. And there was an inflatable that they were getting into. The monster attacked and prevented him from getting into it. So, and they start rowing away, waiting for the Navy to pick them up. The thing is, I think there are just multiple monsters in this movie. I really do. Um, it's not clear one way or the other, but the monster that was in the station that got fried looked like it died, and then the station blew up like pretty conclusively. So if it didn't die from that, it should have died from the huge explosion. So there's probably just multiple monsters. Um, so there's that. This movie's an okay movie. Um, I give it a 5 out of 10. It's not amazing. I don't even remember how my rating system goes anymore. 5 out of 10, or 2.5 out of 5, I guess. I forget which one I was using. Yeah, sorry about that. Forgot my own rating system. That's wonderful. I'll have to go check up what I was doing. Um, you know what? I'm just gonna start using out of 10. It's a more easy way of looking at things, I think. If I hadn't been using that before. Yeah, sorry about being a little lazy on making the videos lately, but life's been kind of busy. So anyway, so yeah, random side notes aside, 5 out of 10. This movie's watchable. It's not amazing, but it's got some good, decent special effects at least. So check it out. It's got practical stuff. It's not CGI. Um, this movie, in my opinion, kind of got remade a little bit in a more recent movie called Sector 7, which I believe is Korean, which is interesting. Has the work ethic monster in it. I call it that because the monster just, like, they kill it so many times and it just keeps coming in. It's the same thing every time. It gets more fucked up every time. Uh, Very interesting, very strange movie. Um, but yeah, so this one's okay, very watchable. Check it out if you like any sort of deep sea adventures or anything like that. You'll probably enjoy this. All right, folks. Good night.